The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone courtyard of Windsor Castle, as thousands of tourists gathered for the changing of the guard ceremony. Among them stood Marcus, a loud American tourist wearing bright Hawaiian shorts and a baseball cap, covered in pins from various countries he had visited. He held his phone high above his head, recording everything while talking loudly to his wife Sarah about how different things were back home in Texas. "Look at these guys, honey. They're like toy soldiers," Marcus shouted, pointing his camera directly at the approaching guards. The Queen's Guard, dressed in their iconic red tunics and tall bearskin hats, marched in perfect formation toward the palace gates. Their faces remained stone cold, eyes fixed straight ahead, as they had been trained to do for centuries. Guard William Thompson had been serving in the Queen's Guard for 3 years. At 25, he had seen every type of tourist behavior imaginable. Some were respectful and kept their distance, while others seemed to think the guards were part of some theme park attraction. Today felt different, though. As the ceremony began, he noticed a group of tourists pushing closer to the rope barriers, their cameras flashing constantly. Marcus wasn't content with filming from behind the rope. He noticed a small gap where he could squeeze through and get closer to the guards. "This will get me so many likes on social media," he whispered to Sarah, who tried to pull him back but failed. Marcus slipped under the rope and walked directly toward the line of guards, his camera still recording. The other tourists gasped as they watched Marcus approach the guards. Children pointed and whispered to their parents, while elderly visitors shook their heads in disapproval. A Japanese family quickly moved their young daughter away from the area, sensing that something was about to go very wrong. Marcus stopped just 2 feet away from Guard Thompson and began making funny faces at the camera, while the guard stood motionless behind him. "Look, everyone, I'm hanging out with the Queen's Guard," he announced loudly to his phone. He then reached out his hand as if to touch the guard's rifle, completely unaware of the serious breach of protocol he was committing. That's when Guard Thompson's training kicked in. Without moving his head, he spoke in a deep, commanding voice that could be heard across the entire courtyard. "Stand back from the Queen's Guard." The words boomed like thunder, causing Marcus to jump backward so quickly that he nearly fell over. The entire crowd of tourists fell silent. Even the chattering children stopped talking. Marcus stood frozen, his face turning red as he realized that hundreds of people were now staring at him. His phone, which had been recording the whole time, captured his shocked expression perfectly. Sarah rushed forward and grabbed her husband's arm, pulling him back toward the rope barrier. "I'm so sorry," she whispered to anyone who would listen, her own face burning with embarrassment. Other American tourists in the crowd looked away, not wanting to be associated with Marcus's behavior. But Guard Thompson wasn't finished. As Marcus stumbled backward, the guard took one perfectly measured step forward and shouted even louder, "Make way for the Queen's Guard." The command echoed off the ancient stone walls of the castle, and every tourist in the courtyard immediately stepped back, creating a clear path for the guards to continue their ceremony. An elderly British woman standing nearby turned to her husband and said, "About time someone put that rude man in his place." Several other tourists nodded in agreement, while others held up their phones to record what had just happened. Within minutes, multiple videos of the incident would be uploaded to social media platforms around the world. Marcus finally made it back behind the rope, his Hawaiian shirt now damp with sweat despite the cool English morning. He looked down at his phone and realized he had recorded the entire embarrassing encounter. Part of him wanted to delete the video, but another part of him wondered if this might actually make him famous on the internet. The ceremony continued as planned, with the guards marching in perfect synchronization despite the interruption. Guard Thompson maintained his professional composure, though inside he felt satisfied that he had handled the situation exactly as he had been trained to do. Protecting the dignity of the monarchy was just as important as protecting the royal family themselves. As the tourists began to disperse after the ceremony, many of them were talking about what they had just witnessed. A group of French students discussed how different the British guards were from the ceremonial guards they had seen in Paris. A family from Australia took the opportunity to teach their teenage son about respecting local customs and traditions when traveling abroad. Meanwhile, Marcus and Sarah walked quietly toward the castle's exit, both of them processing what had just happened. Sarah was mortified by her husband's behavior, while Marcus was beginning to realize that he had made a serious mistake. The other tourists they passed seemed to recognize him as that guy who had caused the scene, and their stares made him feel even worse. As they reached the castle gates, a security officer approached them politely but firmly. "Excuse me, sir," he said to Marcus. "I need to have a word with you about what happened during the ceremony." Marcus's heart sank as he realized that his actions might have consequences beyond just social embarrassment. The officer explained that interfering with the Queen's Guard was a serious matter that could result in arrest or being banned from royal properties. He asked Marcus to provide his identification and warned him that his behavior had been inappropriate and disrespectful to both the guards and the other visitors. Standing there in the shadow of the ancient castle walls, Marcus finally understood the gravity of what he had done. These weren't actors or entertainers. They were real soldiers with an important job to do. His quest for social media fame had turned into a lesson he would never forget. 3 days after the incident at Windsor Castle, videos of Marcus's embarrassing encounter with Guard Thompson had gone viral across multiple social media platforms. The clip showed Marcus jumping backward in shock, his face turning bright red, while the guard's powerful voice echoed across the courtyard. Comments poured in from around the world, with most people supporting the guard's actions and criticizing the tourists' disrespectful behavior. Back at his hotel in London, Marcus couldn't stop checking his phone. The video had been shared thousands of times, and people were calling him everything from the most embarrassing American tourist ever to a perfect example of why people hate Americans abroad. Sarah sat on the bed beside him, shaking her head as she read the comments aloud. "Listen to this one," Sarah said, holding up her phone. Someone from Germany wrote, "This is exactly why we need more guards like this one. Tourists think they can do whatever they want." And here's another from Canada. "That guard showed incredible restraint. In my country, that tourist would have been arrested immediately." Marcus put down his phone and looked out the window at the busy London street below. "I didn't think it would be such a big deal," he muttered. "I was just trying to get a good video for my followers. Back home, nobody would care if you stood next to a security guard or police officer for a photo." What Marcus didn't know was that his video had reached the attention of military personnel around the world, including other members of the Queen's Guard Regiment. In the barracks that evening, Guard Thompson's colleagues gathered around a laptop to watch the viral clip. Some of them laughed at Marcus's shocked expression, while others discussed how perfectly Thompson had handled the situation. "Look at his face when William shouts at him," said Guard Davies, pointing at the screen. "I've never seen anyone jump that high." The room erupted in laughter, but their sergeant quickly reminded them that while the incident was amusing, it highlighted the serious nature of their duties and the respect their position commanded. Meanwhile, at Buckingham Palace, another drama was unfolding. A group of teenage tourists from Italy had seen Marcus's viral video and decided they wanted to create their own version. Armed with selfie sticks and ring lights, they positioned themselves near the palace gates during the afternoon guard change. Guard Rebecca Martinez had been serving for 2 years and had developed a reputation for being particularly strict about protocol. As she marched toward her post, she noticed the Italian teenagers whispering and giggling while pointing their cameras at the guards. One of them, a 16-year-old named Giuseppe, stepped forward with his selfie stick extended. "Excuse me, beautiful guard lady," Giuseppe called out in broken English, trying to get Guard Martinez's attention. "Can you please smile for my Instagram? My friends back home will not believe I met a real British soldier." He waved his selfie stick in front of her face while his friends encouraged him from behind. Guard Martinez continued marching without acknowledging Giuseppe's presence, just as she had been trained to do. But Giuseppe wasn't giving up that easily. He began walking alongside the guard, continuing to talk and wave his camera around. His friends followed behind, recording everything on their phones. "Please, just one small smile." Giuseppe persisted, now walking backward in front of Guard Martinez while still filming. "I promise to tag the royal family in my post. This will be so famous." He was so focused on getting the perfect shot that he didn't notice he was backing directly toward the ornate iron gates of the palace. The collision was inevitable. Giuseppe's back hit the metal gates with a loud clang, and he stumbled forward, his selfie stick flying out of his hands and clattering across the pavement. His friends gasped and rushed forward to help him. While tourists who had witnessed the scene began taking pictures and videos of the aftermath, that's when Guard Martinez stopped marching and turned to face the group of teenagers. Her voice cut through the air like a sword. "Move away from the palace gates immediately." The command was so sharp and authoritative that all 4 teenagers froze in place, their eyes wide with surprise and fear. Giuseppe, still sitting on the ground where he had fallen, looked up at the guard with a mixture of embarrassment and awe. He had expected her to be like the friendly costumed characters at theme parks, not a real soldier with actual authority. The reality of his situation began to sink in as he noticed other guards positioning themselves nearby. We're sorry," Giuseppe's friend Marco called out in English, helping Giuseppe to his feet. "We didn't know we were not supposed to do this." The group began backing away from the gates, their cameras forgotten as they focused on getting out of trouble. But their retreat wasn't fast enough for Guard Martinez. She took 2 steps forward and shouted again, "Clear the area now." Her voice echoed off the palace walls, and every tourist in the vicinity immediately moved away from the gates. The teenagers ran toward the nearest exit, abandoning Giuseppe's broken selfie stick on the pavement. A palace security officer quickly approached the scene to assess what had happened. He picked up the broken selfie stick and shook his head as he watched the teenagers disappearing into the crowd of tourists. "Another viral video incident," he muttered to himself, knowing that this encounter would likely join Marcus's video in the growing collection of tourist fails at royal locations. Within hours, videos of Giuseppe's collision with the palace gates and Guard Martinez's stern response were appearing online. The comments section filled with people sharing their own stories of encountering strict guards at royal locations around the world. Many praised the guards for maintaining their dignity and doing their jobs despite constant disruptions from tourists. Back in Giuseppe's hotel room that evening, he sat with an ice pack on his back while his friends scrolled through the comments on their videos. "Look," Marco said, showing Giuseppe his phone. "People are saying we're just like that American guy from Windsor Castle. They're calling us disrespectful tourists, too." Giuseppe winced, both from the pain in his back and the embarrassment of reading the comments. "I thought British guards were supposed to be nice and polite," he complained. "In the movies, they always seem friendly and approachable." What Giuseppe and Marcus were both learning was that the Queen's Guard weren't performers or tourist attractions. They were real soldiers with real responsibilities, trained to protect the royal family and maintain the dignity of centuries-old traditions. Their stillness and discipline weren't for show. They were marks of professional dedication that demanded respect from visitors. The following week brought an unexpected twist to the growing collection of viral guard encounters. Dr. Helen Morrison, a behavioral psychologist from Edinburgh, had been studying the videos that were spreading across social media. What started as casual interest became serious research. When she realized these incidents revealed important patterns about cultural differences and respect for authority, Dr. Morrison contacted the British Army's Public Relations Department with an unusual proposal. She wanted to create an educational documentary about the Queen's Guard, featuring some of the viral incidents as teaching moments. The Army was initially hesitant, but they recognized an opportunity to help people understand the serious nature of the Guard's duties. Meanwhile, at the Tower of London, another situation was developing that would soon join the collection of unforgettable moments. The yeoman warders, also known as beefeaters, were preparing for their daily guided tours when they noticed a group of tourists behaving strangely near the Crown Jewels exhibition. Among them was Chen Wei, a social media influencer from Shanghai with over 2 million followers on various platforms. She had built her reputation by creating dramatic content in famous locations around the world, often pushing boundaries to get the most engaging footage possible. Today, she was determined to create something that would go even more viral than the recent guard videos. Chen. We had brought professional lighting equipment and a small crew of assistants to help her create the perfect shot. Her plan was to get as close as possible to the guards while performing an elaborate dance routine she had choreographed specifically for this location. She believed her followers would love seeing traditional British guards in the background of her modern dance performance. Yeoman warder. James Fletcher had been working at the Tower of London for 15 years. He had seen every type of tourist behavior imaginable, from marriage proposals to elaborate photo shoots. But nothing had prepared him for what Chen Wei was about to attempt. As the morning tour began, Chen Wei positioned herself near a group of yeomen, warders who were standing at attention near the entrance to the jewel house. She signaled to her assistants to start filming and immediately launched into her dance routine, complete with dramatic poses and exaggerated movements designed to capture attention. The other tourists stopped walking and began gathering around to watch the unexpected performance. Some pulled out their phones to record, while others looked confused about whether this was part of an official presentation. Children pointed and giggled at Chen Wei's colorful outfit and energetic dancing. Yeoman Warder Fletcher watched the spectacle for exactly 30 seconds before deciding he had seen enough. These tourists were not only disrupting the solemn atmosphere of the Tower of London, but they were also blocking other visitors from accessing the Crown Jewels exhibition. He stepped forward with the authority that came from years of military service. "Madam, you cannot film commercial content here without proper permits," Fletcher announced in his distinctive London accent. His voice carried the weight of someone who had served in both the military and as a guardian of British history. "You need to stop this immediately and move along with the tour." Chen Wei paused her dancing but didn't stop filming. She turned to Fletcher with a bright smile and continued speaking to her camera in Mandarin, apparently explaining to her followers that she was being interrupted by a traditional British character. She seemed to think this interaction would only make her content more interesting. "I don't think you understand," Fletcher continued, his patience wearing thin. "This is not a performance space. The Tower of London is a working royal palace and fortress with over 900 years of history. You're being disrespectful to the other visitors and to the significance of this place." Chen Wei's assistants continued filming, capturing Fletcher's increasingly stern expression. They whispered among themselves in Mandarin, discussing whether they should keep recording or pack up their equipment. Chen Wei herself seemed torn between wanting to respect the authority figure and not wanting to disappoint her millions of followers who were watching the live stream. The situation escalated when Chen Wei decided to try a different approach. She began speaking to Fletcher in English, asking if she could interview him about his job and the history of the tower. She held her phone up toward his face while her assistants positioned their professional cameras for better angles. "Sir, please tell my followers about your beautiful costume and your important work here," Chen Wei said with enthusiasm. "My audience loves learning about different cultures, and you could become famous in China." She genuinely seemed to believe she was offering Fletcher something valuable. Fletcher's response was swift and decisive. "You will stop filming immediately and remove your equipment from this area," he commanded. "Commercial filming requires advance permission from the Historic Royal Palaces organization. You are disrupting other visitors and violating our policies." The crowd of tourists that had gathered to watch began murmuring among themselves. Some supported Fletcher's position, nodding in agreement about the inappropriateness of the filming. Others seemed disappointed that the entertainment was ending. A few continued recording with their phones, sensing that this confrontation might become another viral moment. Chen Wei finally realized that this British official was not going to cooperate with her content creation plans. She signaled to her assistants to stop filming and began packing up their equipment, but not before addressing her phone camera one final time in English. "My dear followers, it seems that not everyone appreciates art and cultural exchange, but we respect local customs even when they are very strict." Fletcher watched as the group collected their lighting equipment and cameras. He then turned to address the crowd of tourists that had gathered. "Ladies and gentlemen, the Tower of London is home to the crown jewels and nearly a millennium of British history. We ask all visitors to show appropriate respect for this heritage site and for the other guests who have come here to learn and experience our history." The crowd began to disperse, with many tourists nodding in understanding. An elderly British couple approached Fletcher afterward to thank him for maintaining the dignity of the location. "Young people today think everywhere is their personal stage," the woman said. "Thank you for reminding them that some places deserve reverence." As Chen Wei and her crew made their way toward the exit, she couldn't help but feel frustrated by the encounter. In many other countries, officials had been happy to appear in her videos and gain exposure to her massive Chinese audience. She didn't fully understand why the British guards and warders seemed so resistant to participating. In social media content, what Chen Wei was beginning to learn was the same lesson that Marcus and Giuseppe had discovered. British ceremonial guards and historical site officials take their duties seriously. They aren't entertainers or props for social media content. They are protectors of tradition, history, and dignity, trained to maintain standards that have been upheld for centuries. Fletcher returned to his position near the jewel house, knowing that his firm response had been necessary to preserve the respectful atmosphere that millions of visitors expected when they came to see the crown jewels and learn about British history. 2 weeks after Chen Wei's failed filming attempt at the Tower of London, the collection of viral guard encounters had grown into a global phenomenon. News outlets from BBC to CNN had picked up the stories, and tourism boards were using them as examples of how to behave respectfully when visiting historical sites. But the most surprising development was yet to come. Marcus, the American tourist whose Windsor Castle encounter had started it all, received an unexpected phone call at his hotel in London. Dr. Helen Morrison, the behavioral psychologist who had been studying these incidents, wanted to interview him for her documentary about cultural respect and tourism. At first, Marcus was hesitant. He had already received enough negative attention from his viral moment. "I'm not trying to embarrass you further," Dr. Morrison explained over the phone. "I think your experience, and the others like it, can help educate people about the importance of understanding local customs when they travel. Would you be willing to share your perspective?" After discussing it with Sarah, Marcus agreed to the interview. He realized that his mistake could potentially help other travelers avoid similar embarrassment. The interview was scheduled to take place at the very spot where his encounter with Guard Thompson had occurred, the courtyard of Windsor Castle. On the day of the filming, Marcus felt nervous as he walked back through the castle gates. Tourists recognized him immediately, pointing and whispering as he passed by. Some pulled out their phones to take pictures while others simply stared. The viral video had made him temporarily famous, but not in the way he had hoped. Dr. Morrison met Marcus near the rope barriers where the original incident had taken place. She had arranged for a small film crew to document the interview, and she had also received permission to speak with Guard Thompson, who was off duty that day. This would be the first time Marcus and the guard had met face-to-face since their viral encounter. When Guard Thompson arrived in civilian clothes, Marcus barely recognized him. Without his red tunic and bearskin hat, he looked like any other young British man. Thompson was polite but formal as he shook hands with Marcus, and both men seemed uncertain about how to begin this unusual conversation. "I want to start by apologizing," Marcus said, looking directly at Thompson. "I didn't understand how serious your job was. I thought you were just part of the tourist experience like the characters at Disney World. I realize now how disrespectful that was." Thompson nodded appreciatively. "I accept your apology. I think many tourists don't understand that we're active military personnel with real duties. We're not performers or entertainers. When someone crosses the barriers or interferes with our duties, it's a security issue that we have to address immediately." Dr. Morrison guided the conversation toward the broader implications of their encounter. She explained how their viral moment had sparked discussions about cultural differences, respect for authority, and the responsibilities that come with traveling to foreign countries. The interview revealed insights that neither Marcus nor Thompson had considered before. "In America, we're encouraged to be friendly and outgoing with everyone," Marcus explained. "Taking pictures with police officers or security guards is completely normal. I didn't realize that British military traditions were so different, or that approaching a guard could be seen as a threat." Thompson shared his perspective from the other side of the encounter. "We're trained to remain silent and motionless unless there's a security issue. When someone crosses the barriers or gets too close, we have to respond quickly and firmly. It's not personal. It's just our duty to protect the royal family and maintain the dignity of the ceremony." As they continued talking, both men began to understand each other's perspectives better. Marcus learned about the centuries of tradition behind the Queen's Guard and the serious military training required for the position. Thompson gained insight into American cultural norms and how they differed from British expectations of behavior around authority figures. The conversation was interrupted by a commotion near the castle gates. Another group of tourists was approaching the guard post, and Marcus and Thompson could see that they were about to witness another potential viral moment in real time. A family from Brazil had brought their young son to see the guards, and the 8-year-old boy was becoming increasingly excited as they got closer. "Look, Mama, toy soldiers," the boy shouted in Portuguese. breaking away from his parents and running toward the guard post. His parents called after him, but he was too excited to listen. He ran directly up to one of the on-duty guards and began tugging on the bottom of the guard's red tunic. The guard remained motionless, following protocol, but the boy's behavior was clearly disrupting the ceremony. Other tourists began taking pictures and videos of the scene, sensing another viral moment in the making. The boy's parents looked embarrassed as they tried to call their son back, but he was fascinated by the guard's tall hat and shiny buttons. Marcus watched the scene unfold and felt a sudden urge to help. He had learned from his own mistake, and he could see that this family was about to experience the same embarrassment he had gone through. Without thinking, he walked over to the Brazilian family and gently approached the young boy. "Hey there, buddy," Marcus said in English, kneeling down to the boy's level. "These are real soldiers, not toys. They have a very important job to do, and we need to let them work." He gestured for the boy to step back from the guard, speaking in a calm, friendly voice that helped diffuse the situation. The boy's parents looked grateful as Marcus helped guide their son away from the guard post. They didn't speak much English, but they understood that Marcus was trying to help them avoid a problem. The father nodded appreciatively and said, "Obrigado," thank you in Portuguese. Thompson, who had been watching from nearby, was impressed by Marcus's intervention. "That was well done," he said quietly. "You probably saved that family from going through what you experienced." Dr. Morrison smiled as her film crew captured this unexpected development. Marcus's transformation from viral embarrassment to helpful cultural ambassador was exactly the kind of positive outcome she had hoped to document. It showed how negative experiences could become learning opportunities that benefited everyone involved. As the interview concluded, Marcus reflected on how much his perspective had changed since his viral moment. "I came here just wanting to get some cool videos for social media," he said. "But I've learned that there's so much more to traveling than just taking pictures. It's about understanding and respecting the places you visit and the people who live there." Thompson added his own thoughts about the broader implications of these encounters. Social media has changed tourism in many ways. People want to capture every moment and share it with the world. But some moments require respect and quiet observation rather than cameras and selfies. The documentary would later show how Marcus's embarrassing mistake had evolved into a valuable learning experience, not just for him, but for millions of people around the world who watched his viral moment. It demonstrated that even the most cringeworthy tourist fails could lead to greater cultural understanding when people were willing to listen, learn, and grow from their mistakes. Dr. Morrison's documentary project took an unexpected turn when she discovered that Giuseppe, the Italian teenager who had collided with the palace gates, had become an unlikely advocate for respectful tourism. After his embarrassing encounter with Guard Martinez at Buckingham Palace, Giuseppe had started a social media campaign called Respect the Guards that was gaining popularity among young travelers across Europe. Giuseppe had returned to his home in Naples a changed person. The viral video of his collision with the palace gates had initially made him the subject of jokes among his friends, but gradually it had led to serious conversations about how tourists should behave when visiting important historical sites. He began researching the history and traditions behind the British Royal Guards, and what he learned surprised him. "I had no idea these guards were real soldiers," Giuseppe explained in one of his Instagram posts. "I thought they were just decorations like the fake soldiers you see at tourist attractions. But they're actually protecting the royal family and carrying on traditions that are hundreds of years old. My behavior was completely wrong." Giuseppe's transformation from disrespectful tourist to cultural advocate caught the attention of Dr. Morrison, who invited him to return to London to participate in her documentary. This time, Giuseppe approached the royal sites with a completely different attitude. Instead of bringing selfie sticks and ring lights, he brought notebooks and genuine curiosity about British history and military traditions. His return to Buckingham Palace was emotional. Standing in the same spot where he had fallen and been scolded by Guard Martinez, Giuseppe felt a deep sense of shame about his previous behavior. He had arranged to meet with palace security officials to formally apologize for his actions and to learn more about the proper protocols for visiting royal sites. "When I was here before, I was only thinking about getting likes and followers on social media," Giuseppe told Dr. Morrison's cameras. "I didn't think about the people behind the uniforms or the history of this place." Now I understand that my behavior was not just disrespectful, it was ignorant. Meanwhile, Chen Wei's experience at the Tower of London had also led to unexpected developments. After returning to Shanghai, she had initially been frustrated by her encounter with Yeoman Warder Fletcher. Her followers had been disappointed that she hadn't been able to complete her planned dance routine, and some had criticized British officials for being unfriendly to tourists. But as Chen Wei reflected on the experience, she began to understand Fletcher's perspective. She started researching the history of the Tower of London and learning about the role of the yeoman warders in preserving British heritage. What she discovered made her realize that her approach had been completely inappropriate for such a historically significant location. Chen Wei decided to create new content about her experience, but this time with a focus on education rather than entertainment. She produced a series of videos explaining British historical sites and the importance of respecting local customs when traveling. Her followers were initially surprised by the change in her content, but many appreciated learning about different cultures and traditions. I learned that being a good traveler means more than just visiting famous places, Chen Wei explained in one of her videos. It means understanding the significance of those places and showing respect for the people who protect and preserve them for future generations. Dr. Morrison was amazed by how all three tourists had evolved from their embarrassing viral moments into advocates for respectful tourism. She decided to bring Marcus, Giuseppe, and Chen Wei together in London for a special segment of her documentary. The meeting would take place at Westminster Abbey, a location that represented the pinnacle of British historical and religious significance. The three tourists met for the first time outside Westminster Abbey, each carrying the weight of their viral fame and the lessons they had learned from their encounters with British guards and officials. Despite coming from different countries and cultures, they had all experienced similar journeys of personal growth and cultural understanding. As they walked through Westminster Abbey together, accompanied by Dr. Morrison and her film crew, the three visitors showed a level of respect and reverence that was completely different from their previous behavior at royal sites. They spoke in quiet voices, kept their phones tucked away, and focused on absorbing the history and spiritual significance of their surroundings. Their guide through Westminster Abbey was Father Michael Thompson, an Anglican priest who had been conducting tours for over 20 years. He had heard about the documentary project and volunteered to show the group around, curious to see how these once notorious tourists had changed their perspectives. This abbey has been a place of worship and royal ceremony for nearly 1,000 years, Father Thompson explained as they stood before the altar where British monarchs had been crowned for centuries. Every stone in these walls has witnessed history being made. When visitors come here, they become part of that continuing story. Marcus, Giuseppe, and Chen Wei listened intently as Father Thompson described the coronations, royal weddings, and state funerals that had taken place in the abbey. They learned about the tombs of poets, scientists, and monarchs that surrounded them, and began to understand why British officials took their roles as guardians of this heritage so seriously. When I think about how I behaved at Windsor Castle, Marcus said quietly, I realize I was treating a place of real historical importance like it was just a backdrop for my vacation photos. I wasn't considering that these ceremonies and traditions connect modern Britain to centuries of history. Giuseppe nodded in agreement. At Buckingham Palace, I was so focused on creating content for social media that I forgot I was in a place where real people work and live. The Queen's Guard aren't performers. They're protecting someone's home and carrying out duties that are essential to British democracy. Chen Wei added her own reflection. The Tower of London isn't just a tourist attraction. It's a repository of nearly 1,000 years of British history. When I tried to film my dance there, I was treating it like a stage for my performance instead of showing respect for all the important events that had happened in that place. Father Thompson was moved by their insights. What you've all discovered is that true travel isn't about collecting experiences or creating content. It's about connecting with the deeper meaning of the places you visit. When tourists approach historical sites with respect and genuine curiosity, they become part of preserving those places for future generations. As the Westminster Abbey visit concluded, Dr. Morrison realized that her documentary had evolved into something much more significant than she had originally planned. Instead of simply examining embarrassing tourist behavior, she was documenting genuine personal growth and cross-cultural understanding. The three tourists had transformed from viral sensations into thoughtful cultural ambassadors. The final segment of their Westminster Abbey visit took place in Poets' Corner, where some of Britain's greatest writers and thinkers are memorialized. Standing among the monuments to Shakespeare, Dickens, and other literary giants, the three tourists reflected on how their own stories had become part of a larger narrative about respect, understanding, and personal growth. These writers and poets changed the world with their words and ideas, Giuseppe observed, in a much smaller way. Maybe our mistakes and what we learned from them can help other travelers understand the importance of showing respect when they visit places like this. 6 months after the viral incidents that had made them internet famous, Marcus, Giuseppe, and Chen Wei found themselves in an unexpected position. Dr. Morrison's documentary, titled Guardians of Respect, When Tourists Learn Life Lessons, had been selected for screening at the London International Documentary Festival. The three former tourists were invited to attend the premiere as special guests. The documentary had captured global attention, not just because of the embarrassing viral moments, but because it showed how negative experiences could lead to positive personal growth and cultural understanding. Tourism boards around the world had started using clips from the film in their educational materials, and several universities were incorporating it into their cultural studies programs. On the evening of the premiere, Marcus arrived at the cinema wearing a proper suit instead of his usual Hawaiian shirt and baseball cap. He had spent the past 6 months volunteering as a cultural ambassador for American tourists visiting Britain, helping other travelers understand British customs and etiquette. His own embarrassing experience had become the foundation for helping others avoid similar mistakes. Giuseppe walked into the theater looking confident and mature, a far cry from the teenager who had crashed into the palace gates with his selfie stick. He had started a travel blog called Respectful Explorer that had gained thousands of followers across Europe. His posts focused on the historical significance of famous landmarks and the proper way to appreciate them without causing disruption. Chen Wei entered the venue wearing an elegant dress instead of her usual colorful performance outfits. She had completely transformed her social media content, shifting from attention-grabbing stunts to educational travel documentaries. Her videos about respecting cultural sites had been viewed millions of times, and she had been invited to speak at tourism conferences in several countries. The three unlikely friends sat together in the front row of the theater, joined by some very special guests. Guard William Thompson, Yeoman Warder James Fletcher, and Guard Rebecca Martinez had all been invited to attend the premiere. For the first time since their viral encounters, the tourists and the guards would watch their famous moments together on the big screen. As the lights dimmed and Dr. Morrison's documentary began, the audience of film critics, tourism officials, and cultural experts settled in to watch the remarkable story unfold. The film opened with the original viral videos that had made Marcus, Giuseppe, and Chen Wei internet sensations, but this time the embarrassing moments were presented in a completely different context. The documentary showed how each encounter had been a collision between different cultural expectations and misunderstandings about the role of ceremonial guards in British society. It explained the centuries of tradition behind the Queen's Guard and the serious military training required for positions like the yeoman warders at the Tower of London. When Marcus's encounter with Guard Thompson appeared on screen, the audience could hear gasps and a few chuckles. But the film immediately followed with interviews showing both men reflecting on the experience months later. Thompson explained the security concerns and protocol violations involved, while Marcus discussed his ignorance about British military traditions and his assumption that the guards were merely tourist attractions. Watching myself jump backward like that is still embarrassing, Marcus admitted in his interview segment. But I'm grateful it happened, because it taught me something important about respecting the places I visit and the people who work there. Travel should be about learning, not just taking selfies. Giuseppe's collision with the palace gates drew more laughter from the audience, but again the film quickly shifted to show his remarkable transformation. The documentary included footage of Giuseppe returning to Buckingham Palace 6 months later, this time approaching the guards with appropriate respect and distance while genuinely appreciating the ceremony and tradition. I learned that being a tourist doesn't give you the right to do whatever you want, Giuseppe reflected in his interview. These guards have real jobs protecting real people, and the ceremonies they perform connect modern Britain to hundreds of years of history. My behavior was not just disrespectful to them, it was disrespectful to that history. Chen Wei's encounter with Yeoman Warder Fletcher at the Tower of London was presented as an example of how commercial social media content could clash with the preservation of historical sites. The film showed how Fletcher's firm response had been necessary to maintain the dignity and educational atmosphere that millions of visitors expected when they came to learn about British history. I thought I was sharing British culture with my Chinese followers, Chen Wei explained in her interview segment, but I was actually misrepresenting it by treating a serious historical site like a stage for my performance. Real cultural sharing means understanding and respecting the significance of the places you visit. The most powerful moment in the documentary came when the three tourists were reunited with the guards and officials they had encountered. The film showed their meeting at Westminster Abbey, where genuine conversations about cultural differences and mutual respect had replaced the tension and embarrassment of their original encounters. Guard Thompson spoke directly to the camera about the impact these viral incidents had on his profession. These encounters helped us realize that we need to do a better job of educating visitors about our role and the traditions we represent. We're not just decorations or photo opportunities. We're active military personnel with important duties. Yeoman Warder Fletcher added his perspective on the challenges of preserving historical sites in the age of social media tourism. Every day we see visitors who want to create content, but they don't always understand the significance of where they are. Education is key to helping people appreciate these places properly. Guard Martinez, who had dealt with Giuseppe at Buckingham Palace, emphasized the importance of setting clear boundaries. Maintaining discipline and protocol isn't about being unfriendly to tourists. It's about preserving the dignity and security that these ceremonies require. When visitors understand that, they usually respond with respect. As the documentary reached its conclusion, it showed how the three tourists had become advocates for respectful tourism in their home countries. Marcus was working with American travel agencies to better prepare tourists for international trips. Giuseppe had partnered with Italian schools to teach students about cultural sensitivity when traveling. Chen Wei was collaborating with Chinese tourism officials to promote educational travel content over sensational stunts. Dr. Morrison appeared on screen for the final interview segment, explaining the broader implications of what she had observed. These viral moments revealed something important about modern tourism and social media culture. When people travel just to create content or collect experiences, they miss the deeper meaning of the places they visit. But when embarrassing mistakes lead to genuine learning and cultural understanding, they can actually strengthen connections between different cultures. The documentary ended with footage of all 6 participants, the 3 tourists and the 3 guards, standing together at Windsor Castle, the site where the viral phenomenon had begun. They were no longer adversaries or sources of mutual embarrassment, but partners in promoting cultural understanding and respectful tourism. As the credits rolled and the theater lights came up, the audience gave the film a standing ovation. Critics would later praise the documentary for showing how negative viral moments could be transformed into positive cultural dialogue. Tourism officials from multiple countries would adopt its lessons for their own educational programs. In the months that followed the premiere, the 3 former tourists continued their work as cultural ambassadors. Their story had proven that even the most embarrassing mistakes could become valuable learning experiences when people were willing to acknowledge their errors, understand different perspectives, and work toward greater cultural understanding. The viral videos that had once made them objects of ridicule had evolved into powerful tools for education and cross-cultural communication. Their encounters with the British guards had taught them that true travel wasn't about collecting experiences or creating content. It was about connecting with the deeper meaning and significance of the places they visited and the people they met along the way.